Alright, welcome to the Armored Core Podcast, everybody. It's been a while since we've been back. This time we're going to be talking about some more fun fireside chat kind of topics. We're going to be going into, the times we've tried getting into Armored Core, getting friends in, examining the difficulty getting folks into the game, talking about, how we've changed as players over time. And with me today is FromSoftware and Oddstarva. I, of course, am Sash Perennial. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves?
I am Cheng.
Order, I suppose.
Awkward silence. I'm Oddstarva. Hello.
Hello. All right.
Hi.
So as I was saying, we're going to begin with getting players into Armored Core, like specifically folks in real life. I got a couple stories about this. I don't know about you guys. I can take it from here if you want, or we could listen to somebody else.
Sir, go right ahead and start us off.
Okay, all right.
More sash.
So, for me, I got into Armored Core at the tail end of Armored Core 4. And at around that time, I think For Answer was actually just around the corner. And so I was showing my friends this crazy game Armored Core 4, and we basically all convinced ourselves that we were going to get For Answer when it came out. And so we picked that up, and that was hype as shit, and we enjoyed the co-op features and stuff, and basically played the crap out of that game. So basically, yeah, we had a lot of fun co-oping through that game with most of my friends. I convinced maybe 3 or 4 people to get the game. All on different consoles, ironically, but whenever we'd hang out with each other, we'd play the split screen, and that was kind of like a vestige of old retro gaming, where you'd go to like your friend's place and then pick up an N64 controller, or like sit on a couch and play GameCube games or something. Although of course we had the capacity to play online, which was also kind of a blast. I think I was the only one who really dabbled in playing online, like, kind of competitively. For the most part, it was kind of like, oh, what kind of crazy cosplay build can we play? Oh, I'll beat your black glint with my pink glint. And you get that kind of thing. But unfortunately, none of my friends made the transition to 5th Gen Armored Core, which was kind of sad for me. But, I have one who's always saying, oh, I'm willing to get into it. But I'm like, dude, like, at this point, you're gonna be a potato. Like 5th Gen does not have 4th Gen skills carry over very well, It's just like, and he's really enthusiastic about getting into it. He's like, oh man, like I didn't get it for 5, or no, I think we did play through 5. We did play through 5. He was trying to get Verdict Day was the thing. So we ended up playing through 5 co-op, which was a blast. We have many fun memories from that. If you ever encounter this person in real life, he will fucking go off about how Chief murdered the fuck out of me a bajillion times, and how I kicked the final boss, Exuzia. And that just made his day. But I could never get my friends in the competitive side of Armored Core, playing online with other people other than me. And I don't know why. I just don't know why. I think it just takes a certain kind of individual. And that's all I got to say about that.
Were they any good at it? Like, like decent?
Like... No, they really weren't. It was just like a fun, casual thing that you'd sit down and you'd be like, oh, like make an AC with just one arm weapon, one back weapon, and like we'll just go at it. And then in Armored Core 5, it was more like, hey, let's clear the story. And I remember my friend was really having trouble with Triple L. You remember that boss?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing where like I think if you didn't realize that you needed to use TE and CE weapons, you're sort of just fucked. Because I think he was a dual GAT guy, which I think a lot of players gravitate towards dual GAT.
Yeah, it seems like you either get one or two spectrums of people. You either get the like super just having fun of it, just kind of playing it for kind of its uniqueness, and then you get us, the weirdos. So, I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
honestly, my stories aren't much different. I've been playing Armored Core since like 2010, if I remember correctly. And, oddly enough, I never really tried to get my friends at the start to try playing it until, like, after high school, which was, like, 3 or 4 years later. And even then, I really couldn't get them into it. Like, maybe, most of the times it seems like they've never heard of the game, and because of that, they weren't really that interested. And it probably didn't help that I didn't do a very good job of describing it either. And it's like, I even tried getting people at work, and there's a few people who seem interested, but it's kind of like, they never really stick around very long.
I see. I mean, my friends were like, "Holy shit, what are you playing? This is fucking awesome! Like, I need to go get this game." And even people that I would like never expect to want to play it ended up playing it. Like, I had a friend who was all about like playing tanks and shit, and he tried to tank in For Answer, and it was amusing as fuck watching him try to take on Motherwell and shit. But like they were super into the games, like they were really into it, but just did not do multiplayer.
Yeah, I think it's just.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Phil.
No, you go. I was about to go into spiel, so you finish.
Oh well, I was kind of like I was saying earlier. It's kind of just hard to get over that bump because it seems like they always get into it, but they never get over that that high learning curve. So the game's fun up until they get there, and then at that point, like, I kind of want to play something else. That was all I was gonna add.
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of adding on to you two, because I mean, when you said you got into Armored Core in 2010, it's like, I feel so old. I've been playing since 1997. But yeah, but I've been playing from the get-go, but I didn't start to sort of shove it in my friends' faces until Armored Core 2, because in the UK, Armored Core stopped being advertised after Another Age.
Right.
So the only place you could get it was like online. So sort of like the last I bought Another Age in a store, I put it in Woolworths, and then after that, it vanished. It would only come up secondhand if someone had bought it online and sold it. So like for nowadays, it's like copies of 4 to Verdict Day everywhere for like £1 or £2. It's really depressing. Yeah, it was very much like a private affair when I was playing like Armored Core 1. I kind of skipped to that generation. I like played Armored Core 1 on a demo disc and then didn't play it until I became a collector. But I remember showing my friends like Armored Core 2. But I don't think it helped that I wasn't exactly like popular. So it's again who it's like coming from, who's trying to get someone interested, and where do you stand amongst like your friends and stuff. And I didn't do really a good job of explaining it, because at the time it was just like, oh, it's a big robot and you like get to make it and it's like really cool and you blow things up, and people are just like, yeah, that sounds really like boyish. I'm not bothered about that. But then I got 1 or 2 friends into it, but from like what you guys are saying as well, it ended up being they were in it for the short term, not like deliberately, but almost they pick it up and see the uniqueness and go, oh, this is super cool, and they play it until that runs out, because that's how I've sold it to them, this is the unique thing that you can customize your mech. So they play it to customize, and that's it. I haven't sold it as a like it's a game where you can get really good at it and it's really rewarding. It's actually, well, the gimmick is the robots, so play with the robots for a bit and then you're done. It's kind of, and the games that were around at the time, like on the PS2, like we were talking like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, those sorts of games, and they were like a lot more about the novelty enjoyment factor than about learning. So I feel like Armored Core had a lot to compete against back when I was trying to like introduce my friends to it. I only had 1 or 2 friends who were like similar to me, and that they kind of, like we're saying, that's like a certain type of person that played games for the reward, not for the not for like the novelty. But they didn't last very long, just because they weren't. It's actually weird, because I think my friends wanted to play it with more people, but there weren't enough of us. And it got boring butting heads against each other all the time. But after that, I just kind of stopped. So literally around Armored Core 2, I stopped trying to convince people, because the next game I tried to get people to play was Zone of the Enders, and again I got like 1 person who'd play it, and admittedly we played it for like years, but it was just that people saw it for how I advertised it. I only advertised it as a cool niche robot builder, not as a skill-based game. So yeah, that's the thing. That's why I was unsuccessful.
I'd imagine even if you did advertise it as that, that'd still be pretty hard, just because, niche game. So even if it's, this skill-based robot game, it's like, oh, okay, and then they just move on.
Because people are like, oh, that sounds like effort. Like, why would I want to put that in? It's kind of like something. It's kind of like something that you discover, really. Like you're playing it, and you're like, wow, this is rewarding. You can't like say to someone, play it, because it'll be rewarding. Because then they're like, no, that sounds like effort. You have to kind of discover it.
Yeah, it's kind of like where. It's like the bulk of the game where it starts to get fun or interesting, or to the point where you care about it. You've got to dig so deep that at that point most people just give up, like even a quarter of the distance of the way.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those games as well. Say like, because I remember lending Armored Core 2 to a friend, and this was before I had a phone. And whereas like say, if I lent a friend a Crash Bandicoot game, they could go online and look it up, or they've probably got other friends they can ask for help. But Armored Core is really isolating generally. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's very hard to like lend someone a game or say, come and play this game with me. And nowadays you can just pop on PSN or Xbox or Discord, but back then it'd be like giving this game and you just sit there frustrated with it and put it away because you've got better things to do, because there's no access online to like getting better resources or like guides and things like that. And even then, guides aren't that clear. And like, you know, games again like Crash or whatever, those simple platformers where you can follow the guide and go, yeah, I've got my reward now because I followed the guide. You can't really follow guides for Armored Core if you haven't got the skill to execute them.
I think you were saying something. I think it was Chang earlier about like you need to dig deep for some of the parts of this game. At least in my experience with having my friends all play For Answer, like it was almost a competition of like, oh, have you been able to beat White Glint? Ah! Or like, oh, have you been able to like beat Arteric Corporals or whatever? I think that was the big one on hard. Not a lot of us could do that one. But like that's where like the fun stops, and you're like, oh shit, this game got really fucking unforgiving really quickly. And if you can't expect people to like play through those and like really try to give it their all, then much less can you expect them to really enjoy like competitive online play.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And I think. Well, it's like. Go on.
I was gonna say, I think it's kind of telling, like with your kind of anecdote with For Answer, that's kind of the game that's still significantly easier than the other ones. And you know, if people are still having trouble even getting that far with For Answer, you know, you're talking about Last Raven 3, 2, or even 5. It makes it so much harder. So it's almost like, you know, even with the changes in the game, it's kind of inbuilt in it with how the gameplay and the mechanics works, where it's not very clear, and once you get past a certain point, it just gets so significantly harder.
That's for sure. Phil?
I can't remember what I was going to say.
So much for that.
Fine.
Sorry, Phil.
Yeah,
do you think we've gone through this one enough?
Don't worry.
I think we can talk a little bit, you know, what the game devs or even what we, the community, can do to kind of help this along a bit. Because, you know, obviously Armored Core being Armored Core, this is not a problem that's going to go away very soon. And if anything, it seems like it's something that From has a problem addressing, because with 5 and Verdict Day, you know, that learning curve just went so much higher because the mechanics came so much more complicated, even as other parts of the games became, you know, a little bit simpler.
I don't think the mechanics are actually all that complicated. I just think that the skill ceiling is really high and the skill floor is really low.
Well, that's what I kind of mean when I'm saying that it's complicated, because there's a certain amount of experience and effort you have to put to understand how to use it. Like wall jumping in particular,
you can beat the game
I think.
It, yeah.
I mean, yeah, like on a very basic level, it's a very simple mechanic. But when you think about PvP and playing against other human opponents, being able to use it and use it effectively is so crucial. But so few people have that skill, because the way it's presented in game, it's like you were saying, you can beat the game on story mode without ever having to use it.
Or even switching weapons.
This
or
is
scanning
the
it.
thing.
Yeah.
This is the thing, like, Armored Core games from, like, don't... It's weird, like, Armored Core games, say, like, they're very typical, again, we've always spoken about sequelitis, but, like, Mega Man and games like Mega Man and Mario teach you mechanics and show you how to respond to them. Armored Core doesn't really teach you. You can sort of just plow through with a cookie cutter build, or, you know, the Kurosawa, and basically the game, it doesn't matter, because you can just you can power through it. But if you look at sort of patterns, I was thinking about this earlier, because I obviously manage the Facebook group and stuff, and I've been there for a while, most of the people that come in have started at 4th gen, and the first thing you got to think is why 4th gen? Yes, PSN and Xbox Live and that, but why then did those people tell their friends, and why did their friends stay? Because that's the issue we're discussing, and 4th gen was more successful at it than any of the gen.
Gamers, and it was the easy to get into game.
But why? It's still and I know I have an answer for it, but I'm just like provoking the question of, but why did it provoke those gamers? What's different? There's nothing essentially there is nothing different between when we were gaming and when our newer gamers were gaming. They're still presented with a game with a high skill ceiling. That yes, these people may have played an odd Call of Duty or whatever, they've had exposure to slightly different games, but they're still up against an unforgiving game with a high skill ceiling, with skills that aren't necessarily out there and easy to reach. The one thing I realized that fourth gen did was it had a tutorial.
It looks cool, it makes you feel cool,
and
because
it's really
moving fucking fast and shooting big bullets and shit.
I definitely agree that's a big contributor, but the one thing I think Armored Core would benefit from is a tutorial. It's an easy thing, and I think 4th gen's tutorial is still not great, but a bit like how you have tutorials for fighting games to show you advanced techniques. Like I think it was Ark, I think it was Graphenix that was a few people have done too, but actually started doing like community tutorials on like advanced boost techniques and like drift turning and all that sort of stuff. And that stuff should be in the game, not necessarily advanced stuff like drift turning and but say for like 2nd gen and 3rd gen, like clock hopping is a relatively standard practice. Yet many people don't know that like conserving your energy via clock hopping just by tapping boost on and off. That sort of stuff could be an advanced tutorial. Like, and it's kind of like if you take Zone of the Enders, where it's got a whole tutorial menu that tells you each part of it. Armored Core would benefit greatly from that. Could you imagine a tutorial explaining CE and TE weapons? That's such a simple thing to implement, where you've got one enemy that's immune to CE, one that's immune to TE, and one that's immune to KE, and that you have to attack them with specific weapon types to make it work. It's such a simple thing to implement, and it's idiot proof, because it's basically, you've just got text saying, hit.
Yeah, you can't even clear the tutorial if you don't do it properly.
Yeah, and if you imagine Armored Core split up into its basic elements, especially like say 4th or 5th gen or whatever, and you have to clear the first tutorial by beating the enemy that's only vulnerable to KE, that on its own is not mind-blowing. Putting that all together with everything else, yes, because you're in the middle of a firefight, you're new to the game and you don't know what weapon works. But teaching everything in one bit in isolation and then applying it, Armored Core doesn't have that type of game design. It just throws the whole boat at you, which we as players who are having the mindset to work that out, it's fine, but the devs could fix it with a tutorial and with tutorial style missions and progression.
I don't agree with what you're saying about the mission tutorials and stuff, but I do just want to point out that Verdict Day does have a tutorial for all of that. It's just hidden in the menus, and I actually wanted to talk a little bit and disagree, because my opinion, the reason why 4th gen stands out so much in that it piques the interest of a lot of these newer gamers is kind of the way it's set up. Yes, it has a tutorial, but it has a tutorial. However, when you look at the controls and the way they've kind of simplified some of the elements of the game, the control scheme probably being one of the main ones, a lot of people get into it because it's a lot easier to get into it. Because even if you didn't play that tutorial, you'd probably still get most of the game and be able to play most of it while understanding the mechanics, because they're fairly simple and they're fairly straightforward. I mean, honestly, between a new player and the more experienced player, I would say the skill set is probably the same, because most of it is available from the get-go. And interestingly enough, if you play 1.15, you can basically, as a new player, get an idea of how a veteran would play, without having to worry about the energy consumption. But my main point with that is that because it's a lot simpler and most of the skills and tool sets are available from the get-go, and on top of that, most of it being very fun, it's very fast, it's very exciting. It's so much easier for them to get into. But I do, however, agree about your point when it comes to tutorials and tutorial-related missions. I feel that if we were given more scenarios, particularly in 5th gen, where we had to apply the skills, I think it would have helped out a lot more. Like, do either of you remember the... you already know about the leg, the Sawarabi Cornelius Archibald, but do you guys remember what the story mission was about?
Show up and kill the guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But do you remember what AC he was using?
Yeah, it's RJ. Sniper. AS missiles.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about just within that context, it's one of the fastest legs in the game, has incredible high boost, incredible, what do you call the jumping ability. So it has incredible jumping ability. So think about, instead of having that build on a flat map, I think it was Massif de Longo, so it's got those really low canyons. Think about if you put that build in another map where there were a lot of canyons, and now that build's able to use its mobility to its fullest. So now in order to catch it and hit it, you would have to use high boosts, wall jumps, and so on and so forth in order to effectively destroy that build. Versus in a wide open area where you can just use missiles or a bunch of CE machine guns in order to kill it in under 10 seconds.
But this is me being nitpicky in that you could still brute force that. You could still brute force it. It would be an absolute pain in the arse. But for the average Joe who will go, oh, I'm just going to put on my Stracosas on my medium biped and will struggle with it, but they'll eventually whittle it down, or they'll dual get.
Well, I think that's kind of the thing though, is that when it comes to game design, there should be a reward either for using the skill set necessary to beat it, or for the player investing in their own skill set, to beat it in their own way instead of what the game wants them to. So I don't particularly mind that, but as long as there's that higher difficulty for it. So for me personally, as kind of a game designer in training, that's fine. But as a kind of training tool, for newer players, it'd be important for it to kind of push them in the directions of building those skill sets and understanding the mechanics and so on and so forth.
I think the main thing is to have tutorial missions you can get away without, or like missions with tutorial-esque lessons in them, but an actual in-depth tutorial system is what Armored Core needs, where you can basically be in a playground experience.
Like a
so,
little
for
sandbox
example,
mode?
You can have like a sandbox mode, but it's kind of like you want to learn boosting and like say side chaining and all that crazy stuff, and you're given a sandbox with infinite energy. Yes, that's one of the patches from For Answer and 4, but if your trading mode actually enabled you to have that sandbox and like infinite ammo to play with and having a real proper training area, because Armored Core doesn't need that necessarily, but it needs a real, I'll say in depth, but it needs a proper tutorial, not just like a.
So what you're saying is
fourth gen was basically here are the buttons.
that Armored Core 6 is going to be a 9-breaker remaster.
God,
9-breaker is a tutorial.
Oh God. Well, no, but again, 9-breaker doesn't tell you how to play the game. 9-breaker,
exactly.
9-breaker, yes, it is 9-breaker is an amazing teaching tool, but it never tells you what to do, and that's because we're clever people. But if we want to make Armored Core accessible for people that necessarily don't have that grit, or we need to basically take the difficulty of learning the initial controls away. And yeah, 4 was a simpler game in ways, but it essentially was like, here are the buttons, you learn how to press them. We actually need to do, here are the buttons, and you might want to press them in this order, and then they can work the rest out from there, if it's going to be as complex as 5th gen. Because 5th gen isn't complex to
I would
us,
contend that it's more learning
Yeah.
how to build ACs. At least, I think it matters much less in 4 and 4 Answer, because you can't radically alter the way that a build performs just with some starting parts. Those are kind of locked further down the way.
Yeah. I think that would come second, though.
Yeah.
I think, as in, like, that would come later because you've learned how to play properly.
Like in 5th gen, for example, like if I swap to HRJ with low power or low consumption boosters at the start, like junk parts, I'm handicapping myself for the rest of the game, especially if I try to learn to play like that. And so I feel like, I think Cheng and I were having a discussion about this years ago about the standard starter build should be like a baseline mainline build that's able to really like let you learn the game instead of being handicapped and letting you handicap yourself by trying to change it when you don't know yet.
Like the starter builds in 4 and 4 Answer, because it's kind of separated into those different models,
Yeah, but like, you got two scenarios of this, and it's just devil's advocate. And again, we're talking for an experience where we know those aren't quality builds because we're experienced players. And yes, we think an easier build. If you go from a mindset that somebody who has great difficulty playing or is new and doesn't have the grit, what is going to make that access easier? Giving them a new build isn't going to teach them the controls better. It's just going to let them abuse their way of controlling more, which is fine, because a higher percentage of players may figure out how to work it, but you're still going to get quite a high failure rate of players that don't understand how to use a good mech.
And now we talk about Human Plus.
Yeah, well, no, not necessarily human plus, but imagine the two scenarios. You give someone with an okay AC, no input tutorial. They've got to work it out. And imagine you have it on a curve of how long it takes them to play the game effectively if they stick at it. If you give someone thorough input tutorial with a crap AC, they will understand the benefits of a better AC the more they experiment with parts because they can use them properly. If you give someone really good parts and they have no idea how to play the game, they see no value in the customization system because they don't understand the reward.
Yeah, I see that.
You know, so yeah, it is a case because if you can play really well and you're going, oh man, I'm really like enjoying glide boosting. It's kind of like you're enjoying it, but you don't really know what else to do. And then you go, oh, I don't know what this generator thing is, but I'll just like change it. And you go, oh, holy shit, I can do it even better now. Like it's that click. But if you just give someone an amazing AC that can glide boost forever, and then suddenly they change their generator, it's like, oh, why is it gone? I don't get it. And it's a more negative experience rather than kind of the good growth.
I get you.
Sort of thing.
But then that's where that sort of tutorial comes into play then, is that the information's there if you want to find it past, like, the standard tutorial. You go into, like, advanced build mechanics.
Well, yeah, but I think Armored Core does that. I don't know, I can't really remember 5th gen, but you could press on all PS2 titles, you can press select, and it tells you what those things mean. It says, yeah, so as much as yes, it's not a tutorial, that information is there, and it doesn't take that much digging because it is just a case of, you know, knowing, oh yeah, most menus have a detail or help option, and that's pretty common in games. But you just got to look what the biggest barrier is, which is control scheme, which is piloting, which is what we all said is, you know, you can see people using really good builds because they got them off their friend, but they're just garbage when they play. That's the biggest barrier, is people don't get reward from playing with their mech, I'd say anyway.
So I guess, you know, we did talk a bit about what the community do, but with kind of the builds, the copying, and not having the right skill sets, what would you guys say is, like, what could we, the community, do to kind of make this less of an issue?
Make guides.
Okay.
Like
we failed that. We failed that with 5th gen,
saying,
but
like, oh,
continue.
it's not the target audience. It's not the you missed this thing here. It's not meta.
The thing is, we don't have a large enough a community to appreciate that sort of stuff. But if you take, again, and just from my experience, like in Final Fantasy Savage raiding content, where 99% of the populace can't do it, it's accessible to the 99% because of high quality guides. Yes, it's a bigger community that is willing to accept advice, admittedly, but if there's a high quality accessible guide, more people would look at it. Like, from watching Ark's guides way back in the day, and Griff won't mind me saying this, his guides are ridiculously long, and although spoken friendly in some places, they're a bit overly technical for someone new. But you'd need a very professionally made guide with loads of overlay and press the button here and look at the effect of it and really breaking it down. But nobody's going to watch a half an hour tutorial when they want to play their game. I think it'd take a really high quality, but it had to be. I don't know how to describe it, but I think we need tutorial of some form. I mean, I remember seeing a tutorial for 4 Answer about someone actually did recordings of every single blade swing on every single leg type, so that you could choose what legs were best for your blading, you know, and that kind of stuff is really useful because the blading community again was really popular.
Yeah, I remember learning about the quad blade swinging with the L10, freaking the fuck out.
Yeah, and it is kind of like Cheng was saying about seeing the reward of different leg types and how, you know, showing the Archibald Cornelius legs. It could be you just do a video solidly on boost drive and going, and literally it just said, you say in your video, like, depending on what leg type you use, boost drive you can jump different amounts of time, and just showing the difference. And it's like a 5-minute video and explaining how boost drive works and how you can chain it. You know, really short burst tutorial. But that's not a good old solution, because, you know, tutorials take effort to watch and to make and to follow. It's not the all fix.
Yeah, it's effort for minimal return.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the hard part about tutorials that those of us who make it aren't always aware of, is that sometimes people don't want to be told what to do, even if it is the right thing, you know, as in it's the thing that you need to know to do what you need to do. And sometimes it's too much effort for them. It's like, oh, it's too long. Oh, this is not interesting enough. Oh, this is going too slow, and so on and so forth. And I think that is a big problem with our guides, is that They're, like you were saying, they're a bit long-winded. Sometimes they're not spoken in layman's terms, and sometimes they're just they don't get the point across. So they're telling you what you need to know, but it's not in a way where you understand it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'd say is like, it's something that actually like Sash did with me. But I'm an experienced player, but Sash and I actually had like a session where we played each other, and Sash wasn't playing seriously against me.
15%.
He 50? Is that real? But yeah, Sash wasn't playing serious. Yeah, Sash wasn't playing seriously against me because he was pushing me relative to what I needed, which is like proper. It wasn't like a formal teaching or mentoring session or whatever. It's like we were just having fun, and Sash was enjoying teaching me. But that's kind of, we need some figures who don't mind teaching, and not necessarily proper teaching, but playing relatives to someone's level. Because obviously the one thing we suffer from in the community is elitism. We're not saying to people, let them win. You're always going to win because you're better. Sash didn't once let me win a match unless I'd actually earned it. But when playing against someone who you know is trying, lower to yourself to a point that you're letting them learn. Because actually people aren't going to get good when there's so much to learn. You know, you've got to... Yes, if you can see they're just being brain dead and holding triggers, you've got to push them to a point where they'll do something. So I think it's about being more accommodating as a community to when you're playing against someone new. But obviously, if you go into a free battle room, don't lower your standard. But if you're playing against a friend or a clan member that wants to learn, that's when you lower your standard. We're not saying go easy all of the time. Just lower your standard when you know there's someone trying to improve. I would say anyway, be a bit more selective about when you play. Play serious when you need to, but play, if you're trying to help someone, then do.
It's a fair call.
Pretty simple.
Cheng, you got any input?
No, that's about it. Phil actually covered those points really well, and he talked about a lot of stuff that I want to do. So I'm good.
Sweet.
Well, good shit, guys. You want to move on to part 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So this next part's gonna be about changing build philosophies. I guess I could maybe lead into this as well.
I think you already did. So Phil already did. So I guess I'll start. So just to change up the pace a bit. So I'm gonna go with 5th gen just because it's the most apparent. But I
was gonna start in 4th and explain my growth as a player. But all right, you do you.
Leave my accent alone.
Get appropriated.
I wish they could see the chat. But anyway, so
all right, I'll cut it out.
So I started with 5th gen as kind of where I noticed a lot of my build philosophy changes. But I started out as a light autocannon tank, and I would just play a super defensive slow game where I'd wait till they approach me and then chase them. But kind of as the game went on, I found that I kind of wanted to expand my interest. So after the light tank, I did the regular sniper rifle midweight for a while, kind of developed my abilities and my ability to wall jumps, and then kind of just built off from there. And I built a lot of different stuff. I had that midweight that's focused just on glide boosting. I had the Tolima series, which is probably one of my favorite for a wide variety of things. And I had top-down quad and a lot of weird designs. One thing I noticed while I was building is that kind of what I wanted to play with kind of changed as I got better and I played more. So I had the more basic builds and the ones which were kind of guaranteed to win me all the time. But I kind of wanted to gravitate more towards those ones which required more effort, which were I deemed more interesting to play with, that I felt was more rewarding versus when I played other builds. And I think Otstarva and Sash can probably attest to this as well. But basically, as I went on, I was looking for things which I found to be more rewarding and more interesting to me. And I think that's a very common thing among our veterans, where as they play with builds, they gravitate to the ones which are more interesting to them, basically. And that's all I got for now.
All right. Yeah, I think I agree with you on most parts. I remember mostly just playing, saying, oh, these parts are fun. But if I could say like so, like back in Armored Core 4, I was primarily concerned with just beating the game, like just the story. And so I gravitated towards the double back serious laser cannons, the high laser cannons, and just building my AC around basically using only those, which was kind of hilarious. But that let me clear the game, and I was happy. And then when I played PvP, I saw like I just poked into the online lobby, and I was like, oh, look, it's a guy. And then I got destroyed by rifle and missiles. And I was like, well, I guess I gotta look up some YouTube videos. And then, bam. I was like, all right, so this is what people are doing. And I think that sort of just reiterated my experience in the games repeatedly. Was I'd play through the campaign or the story and just kind of like used whatever looked fun or cool. And then I'd play some online matches, and then I'd lose to shit, and then I'd basically just copy it and be like, okay, so this is the guy using this kind of build, with these weapons. Let me try something similar and see if this works. And I think in For Answer I really got into like trying to reverse engineer people's tech and stuff because I couldn't tell what tunes they had and whatever. But that was a lot of fun. And then in 5th Gen, Armored Core 5, that was just like a blast to play. I had so much fun experimenting with all the new weapons and whatnot. And then when it came to PvP, fuck. I did anything that I could to not use the dual GAT RJ. Tried so hard to be like non-meta. Never bought the Beowulf head, never used it. Was basically just like trying to find less viable alternatives of every, meta weapon. Was really a riot. And I guess in Armored Core Verdict Day I gave up and just kind of wanted to like see how far I could push myself to be good at the game, and started using really whatever would improve my abilities as a pilot in terms of just like using the most min-maxed build possible to give you the most advantage over my opponent, because I really wanted to pursue the competitive setting then. And then I ended up on JP and it was nuts. The end.
Give some examples of builds.
Let's see. In 4 I really like the fucking Dusk Aurora legs, and because I had such a relationship with them, I ended up running Light Quad in 5. Early on, which, as you can tell, fighting fucking dual GAT RJs with dual strikes was not great. So I think I had like a pre-dire sniper with like lasers and bullshit. All knee was a big thing, and I liked that really lightweight laser rifle that has 30 shots, rapid fire. Really a lot of fun. I liked fucking impact weapons, like shit like the snipers and whatever. Yeah, what else? I think I also ended up settling on Tolema in Armored Core 5. Just because VTFs were awesome. You could carry Strex and whatever. Mostly, I think I have some really old footage of fucking duels from Armored Core 5, where I'd basically use like I'd always like mix and match parts in the same category, so I'd have like one Lotus and one Strakoza, and then like one Psychad, one Baum or whatever. I think my absolute favorite practice build was Plasma Gun with Strakoza, dual subs on like a really AP stack mid. And that was because that was when people would come at you with dual amp PMGs, and I'd kind of just stuff them in the face, and I enjoyed that. And then afterwards I was like, well, TE weapons are kind of fucking scary, so let's just try heavies, and then heavies were a thing. Moving in Armored Core 5, though, I really just wanted to learn mechanics to abuse them, because people were catching up in terms of build knowledge. Like, they were understanding, like, oh, I guess buffing out these weapons is smart. Because I think a lot of my skill, if you could call it that, in 5 came from understanding build mechanics. Because in 4th gen, it's not really important what defense numbers you have, but in 5th gen, of course it is. So I would like really try to min-max my defenses in weird ways to buff out weapons or whatever, and then I'd just basically abuse the defense formula to people who didn't understand it as well, and like armor break and shit. But of course, by the tail end of 5, everybody who was left, like, they understood what the fuck they were doing. So it was basically like, oh, I guess we're just gonna equip snipers on every build, and then have it that, because everybody knew what they were up to. In Verdict Day, I tried to prey on that a little bit more. Originally, I spammed fucking dual 12s with dual Dimapur, because basically nothing blocked that out. And then I found the, I guess you could call them the 3rd gen Dimapur, the ones that were added with Verdict Day, which are really fun too. But that kind of dissolved into just like being the guy who wanted to run dual Strakozas on a heavy at all times. And that was it. And then now I just use like whatever meta garbage I could find.
Oh, you
The
tier whore.
Yeah, pure meta. Whore. I mean, like,
what about? Oh, go ahead.
I'll build for whatever's fun for the occasion, but like if I want to, like if I'm playing to win, then I want to equip myself as much as possible to win.
You follow the dress code.
Yeah, follow the dress code. There you go. I mean, I think in 5 people were always saying like, oh, they copied my build, or I invented dual pulse guns, or whatever the fuck. My philosophy is the only thing you can own about your AC are the emblems and the decals. Everything else is fair game. Like, if you lose to whatever build, like, reverse engineer that shit, it's gonna make you a better player. Like, feel free to use it, learn how people beat it. That's just how I do shit. It's like Legos. Break it apart, see what's made. Bam.
Bam.
Take it away.
You take the Legos and you just start beating the shit out of other people with them.
Yes.
All right. What about
Shall
you,
I-
Phil?
Go for it, Starver.
Thanks, Sash. I don't know, like I don't think I have as a technical recap as you guys, but like from first to Armored Core 2 maybe to Another Age, I played like biped machine guns essentially, which is why I don't like them very much now, because you can essentially cheese all retro games with machine guns, and it's just I got bored by it, so I now find it really boring. But I tended to go with light midweights that were normally either the 500 or 1,000 ammo machine guns with a simple missile pack. I don't know why, I wasn't really attracted to heavy builds or like using a variety. I kind of like to keep it simple. My builds always like favored mobility. They still do really. Although I think I refined that more through learning in 4th and 5th gen. But it was when Armored Core 2 Another Age, I remember doing just loads of experimenting, but I kind of still stuck to the formula. As only when I went back to it that I changed. But in Armored Core 3, with more left arm weapons, that's where I started to change. Again, when I played Armored Core 3 through like the first few times, I did machine guns. I had an awful AC called Speed Test that for some reason I insisted on using the default biped legs.
What a
just
man!
because of how
Holy
they looked.
shit.
I know, but the AC was, it worked. I mean, everything worked in 3rd gen, pretty much, as long as you had energy and wasn't overweight. But once I'd broken through that, I think like it probably went after I'd been playing it like Armored Core 3 and Silent Line for like a year maybe, or like around that time, maybe a bit less. That I'd always like put on a howitzer, because howitzers were really rewarding to use for like that second burst, that second punch. And eventually, I remember I started using machine gun and sniper rifle combos, because sniper rifles, although they didn't look like they did a lot, like because of the way they fired, but when they hit, they actually did quite a lot. And as a left arm weapon, they were really effective because you didn't have to worry about the lockbox in Silent Line. So you kind of got that high damage output without really worrying about the about the lockbox. And then it was only through like just basically like I remember really liking Karam from Silent Line. He's like, I think he's like C3 or C7. He's around that rank in the arena. And all I used to do in the old games was basically blitz through the arena first. I'd go through the arena as high as I could, do some missions, then go through the arena again. Like I'd push my limit on it. And I really liked Karam, and he had I remember he had it was the RF220H heat rifle. And I always used to get freaked out of, why am I overheating? Because I'd always put my radiator second. And that rifle made me think, oh yeah, I'm going to try rifles. And from then on, I've always, in basically PS1 to PS2 games, I've always used rifles and snipers in tandem. Like, if I can use them as left arm sniper, I will. But I'll always use a rifle on my left arm just because of Karam. And I don't know why. It just took me that it was actually effective. It didn't look great, but it was effective. And it was again in Silent Line that I went from using a single missile pack, which I did in 2, to actually going, hey, a missile pack and extensions are actually better value for weight and value for energy. So I was reaping that reward more of using the S/40-1 default single slot missile with the R24 extension, because it actually it made a triple shot system where you fired 3 missiles with 1 lock on, but it was actually more effective and efficient than the triple shot missile. You got more ammo, it weighed less, and it had less energy. So I was finding more efficient ways of creating weapons that the game was offering me with what I was being given. So I kind of used my main build for Silent Line, and I actually used it as well in Last Raven and Nexus, which made it really hard actually. I had a series of ACs called Havisham, and Havisham 1, 2, and 3 was basically, because I love my mobility, and I get Sash was talking about min-maxing, I kind of liked to min-max what DPS, that damage per second, I could get on a lightweight. I didn't like using uber lightweights, but it was kind of like I was using like Hadro, LGSK legs and 008 head, and Hadro arms and Ner core, that kind of stuff. And I ended up using a lot of like, not mega light, but pretty light ACs that could pummel out a lot and abuse OB. And I managed to keep that in Nexus, but it was really hard because of OB being nerfed and, you know, heat mechanics and stuff. It was only when I got to Armor Core 4 and 4 Answer and completely changed my philosophy because because of the way that FCS worked. FCS was now, sniper rifles were a lot harder to use because of the speed and the lock time, and I was no longer getting that reward. And I wasn't getting that reward from rifles either, because of, you know, basically if you just hold down triggers, you're most likely not going to make a shot because it's all about timing them for the enemy's movement when you're going up against other ACs. And I only got that when I got to PvP. When I hit PvP, the build I ended up with was Latona legs. So it was a lightweight AC. Latona legs with laser rifle arms, a chain gun on the left, and a triple shot VTF missile on the back. So it was completely different to anything I'd ever seen before. And I just got a lot of, for fourth gen, if I could get maximum damage out of one shot, I was happy with that. It was more of an opportunist build. And again, it was almost like a transition from me from DPS on PlayStation 1 and 2 to sort of like precision shooting in 4th and 5th gen. Because then when I came to 5th gen, I carried on with this sort of precision build philosophy because I went pure sniper. All of my builds were sniper focused, dual snipers, subcomputers, nothing else. You know, unless I needed it for a mission, I'd put it on. But PvP, I only ran snipers, and that kind of did screw me over. And eventually, after being taught, I learned to take a PMG with me, or something CE. But where I could, I'd use snipers because you could tune them to the point they could basically bust through anything.
Right.
So, because I remember with a guy called Frosty, who now plays a lot of 2D sprite fighting games, we had a spreadsheet, and we'd actually worked out the percentages of the increase per run for the stats, and we ended up essentially breeding sniper rifles.
Oh, wow.
But we ended up with, that was what made sniper rifles really rewarding, because the muzzle would be absolutely ridiculous, and the precision was brilliant, because it literally, you hit the trigger, they're hit, you know.
Yeah, snipers in 5 are pretty fucking good.
Yep.
But the problem for me was that, so from 5 to Verdict Day, I'd made myself into a bit of a chicken, because in 4th gen I didn't go online too much, but in 5th I played purely with snipers, and because I played in teams quite a bit, I never got hit with people in close range. And when I did, it was very like, okay, someone else will deal with it, or I don't play 1v1 very often. And when it came to Verdict Day, I mean, everyone can attest to this, you guys can attest to it, I just panic in anything that's not long range, because I don't know how to play anything but long range because of snipers and precision shooting, and it's hard to deal with speed and fast lock boxes. But now that I'm in Verdict Day, it's kind of like what you're saying, Sash. I will just take what I'm given. I'll ask people for builds. It's because I'm trying to learn how to play meta rather than play what I play. So I don't really have a build style in Verdict Day. It's whatever works, but I do have a sniper in the garage, really. So there is the evolution of me.
It was fun to listen to, especially the early gen parts. I remember actually when I went to play Last Raven, after playing everything else, I was in much the same boat. Like, oh, I hear machine guns are kind of good, and then eventually settling on dual rifles, ironically.
Yeah, and machine guns not being so great in Nexus onwards just because of the reload, the mag reload.
Reload is a
and it's
funky.
like,
anyhow, I think, Phil, you actually you answered our next question about how your skill level and experience tends to start affecting your build tendencies. It seems like At first we're like, oh, this feels good, this looks cool, and then we're moving into like, what more can I get out of this? Like, how can I increase the yield of my AC or my parts setup?
Yeah.
AC businessmen.
Yeah,
Something
because
like
the
that.
TLDR of what I said, so I can hand over to one of you guys, is basically like that in independent play, I could like maximize the enjoyment of my style, but then when it came to fourth, but mainly fifth gen, and suddenly it was like the equivalent of like a big game boss fucking me over. Like, I'd get to a certain mission and the boss would screw me over, but instead of it being a boss, it was other players online suddenly saying, "Yep, your style doesn't work, change it." But it was happening like every single match, and it was just so constant that none of my builds worked, and I didn't have time to like experiment anything because I'd have spent years perfecting what I liked offline. So I think the fact that the game didn't challenge my own build philosophy very much made it really difficult when I was being challenged every 2 minutes online. That rate of challenge is completely different.
I think like early on in players' careers, they're like, oh man, this looks awesome. Let's use that. This seems to produce results. And then when they hit that boss, whether that's an actual in-game boss or like a level or whatever else, they either go, okay, I either need to get good or I need to go back to the drawing board and like figure out how to make my build better. And I think that's one of the beauties of Armored Core games is you can change your style of play radically by altering your build. But at the same time, there's also enjoyment to be had in trying to like master your one play style. I remember hearing that a lot in Armored Core 5 when people were like having that weird kind of flame war between like, oh, use the metagame, or oh, I'm anti-meta for life, whatever. Where they were saying like, oh, you're much more of a cool player when you, and I use cool here in air quotes, when you use like just one build and you only play one build ever. You never swap up even if you get hard countered, and you just get really good with that build. Or you could be the guy who's like always trying to mind game the opponent, always pulling out like all the cheekiest tech that you can use, trying to get the win however you can, and just kind of abusing the parts in the game instead of really trying to, air quotes, gain the skill.
That thing about the one build thing actually brings up a question I was thinking of. So
what's that, Mr. Toloma, man?
So like,
Sorry.
of course you would, but when it comes to the one build thing and kind of sticking to your guns, so to speak, at what point does someone consider, oh, I should move on, or hey, I should stick with this? Because in 5th gen in particular, there are quite a few cases where sometimes just the build can't do it.
Yeah, there really is.
And you see this a lot with the new players where they've stuck with it since the start,
and they're handicapped, and they've sedimented their tendencies of learning how to play, and that's all they do, and it's not
right.
And what you just said says loosely links back to what we were saying earlier. If a player is given a certain build at the start of their play cycle, they won't learn anything else but that build. But if they're given a crap build and learn how to play, they can then experiment.
But the issue is that they make the crap build.
What I'm saying a bit more is like a build that they've kind of crafted themselves, and they put, let's say, a significant number of hours into it, and there's a point where they say, okay, based on what I'm doing and based on my skill level, I can't beat this, or I can't beat this person consistently. Do I, at that point, is this a reconsideration of I should move on to something else, or do I is it investing more hours into it until they can, basically they're beating their head against the rock. Do they keep beating it until the rock breaks, or do they just stop doing it?
I mean, I'm all in favor of TM Rock Smash, but I mean, some people just like dropping games, and that's fine. Like, if you're not having fun, then don't play the game. That's all I have to say
for
about
me,
it.
because this is, for me, this is me from experience, because you guys both know I like smash my head against rocks because I just cannot break through the being mediocre.
Correction, sir. We smash you against the rock.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you're the HM slave.
But like, for me, it's like when I'm fed up of losing. Because I know I'm not, because I understand my skill level, I know I'm never gonna really win or have a high win rate, but like when I'm in a match, you kind of get a certain amount of reward from going, oh, that was a good dodge, or I played that bit really well where we danced around the building for a while, or I got a couple of shots off and I only lost by this many thousand AP this time. But when I'm like outright losing or just playing like trash, it's like, okay, this isn't working, and it's either because I've tunnel visioned, I'm not in the mood, but half the time I'll look at it and go, yeah, it's my build. Like, my build's too heavy, my turn speed's not high enough, and yeah, this is me as a more experienced player. I can look at those things, and that I tend to criticize myself a lot when playing Armored Core and go, yeah, that's not working. But it's normally when I'm no longer getting that reward out of playing that I try to change it, and it will normally be, well, what are they using? Or I like what it depends on how much I dislike what I've got. If I like the build, I'll be like, okay, well, the turn speed's not great, I'll change that, because I think that'll make it more responsive and enjoyable. Or it might just be, you know what, this whole thing's crap, why do they even bother trying to learn Kumos?
Right.
And
So
I'll
you
look
either
at,
try.
I'll look up.
Yeah, you go in there trying like, oh, how can I make this better? Or like, okay, back to the drawing board. We need something new. Like, time
Yeah, it
to put on
depends
my inventor hat.
on the severity.
Yeah.
Depends on the severity of the situation, but yeah.
Well, that was nice.
Yeah, that was me done on that one.
I don't know. I think I really appreciate what you had to say about that. Just in terms of like when you're stuck in that situation of like, do I want to put in the work, as it were, or like go back and like try to make something new? It's like I personally am a big fan of just saying, hey, take a break from Armored Core, like come back to it with like a fresh face, and go and like go check and see if you haven't like missed something in your build calculations or whatever. And like that's worked wonders for me. Is when I get frustrated with the game, I just step away for a while.
Yeah, I think it's just more in my nature. In my nature is I must be doing something wrong. It's just kind of how I think. It's really bad. It's not quite unhealthy, but I'll be like, I'm doing something wrong. I'm gonna look at someone that's doing it right. So I remember more recently is when I went around asking players I thought were really good, saying, oh, like, I know it's not going to solve my problems, but could I have one of your good builds? Because that'll be, I know I can access the skill tree of this game, so can I have a good build to make it more accessible? When people were like, I just kind of put stuff together in the garage, and I'm just like, really?
Yeah.
This is
That's what it turns
really
into.
helpful.
Yeah.
No one has any of their builds saved. They just make them. I'm like, great. But yeah, I'm willing to do either. But most of the time it's tweaking, because I think most of the time it'll be tweaking what I've got, because a part of the reward is using what you've made, and if you just take someone else's, it takes a part of the fun away from me.
I hear that. Cheng, you got any input?
Oh, I'm out.
Okay.
He's all out.
I'm all out.
Okay,
Man, are we gonna do the optional question, or are we gonna move on to what makes builds fun?
Let's do the fun.
Let's do the
kind of
funny.
skill
Okay,
level.
terrific.
We've sort of been talking about that already,
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about the forbidden word, fun.
I think fun's pretty subjective. Honestly, I think getting good at a game, takes three things. Takes having fun, takes putting the time in, takes having focus. If you're not having all those things in there, you're not going to get any good. And so having a fun build is it's a third of enjoying the game, I think. And it's a third of what makes the game worth investing in. And sorry for cutting you off, Phil.
No, it's fine. I was cutting you off.
it's well, now I'm cutting you off. So
Damn it.
So I think
John Cena. Sorry, I had to.
Oh my god.
Anyway, carry on. It's fine.
So I think fun is very hard to describe in words, particularly when it comes to Armored Core, because going way back into our discussion, a lot of time Armored Core can just feel like just beating your head against the wall, and that's why a lot of people drop off fairly early on. But I think when it comes to multiplayer and online, fun is kind of linked together with winning. So if you're not winning, most of the time people are not having fun. Part of it being losses are really easy and really hard to take, but I think just because a lot of it is just it's only fun when you win.
I think it depends on what kind of personality you have, honestly, if you don't mind me cutting off there, Chang. Like
Well,
I think
maybe
like
it is
a lot of
personality.
a lot
but
of people that seem to get into the game are like into the customization aspect. Like you can see that there's a big part of the community. I'd say almost half of them that have kind of like secluded themselves from online public discussion because they're not like
well, that's
they're not
'cause they
super
don't.
serious about the game, or maybe they don't know about it. I'll take your word for it, Cheng.
I mean, I mean, but they don't even. But technically speaking, they're only playing half the game, and
They
you
are
know,
only
at
playing
that
half the game,
point,
but that's the
you
half
know,
they enjoy. Is what is the,
Okay,
the
but-
point I'm trying to make.
but
Is they're
can
like,
you-
oh man, I want to make this AC look like Jehuti or whatever, you know, and then they're going and doing that, and they're having fun with that, and they're saying, hey, I bet my Jehuti AC can beat your Gundam Wing Zero AC or whatever, or your Kampfenwagen Vogels whatever. Sorry, I don't like Gundam. And then they have that, and that's fun for them, and they're not interested in the really like getting the most out of the game in terms of like stats. They're in terms of like, you know, maybe like role playing or just, you know, having fun making something look cool, like a work of art. But when you have,
I know
if you have like the inventive personality that merges with the competitive one, then you get players that stick around and play the online portion because they're like, oh, I want to tinker around and try to make a build that's gonna like supplement my skill level and help me win. And winning is fun,
You know,
as you say.
I know it's a bit semantics, but I mean, I think that's building is fun rather than a build is fun.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because you can have as much as fun on your own time, but you know, but like that's kind of what's like focusing on 5th gen a bit is, you know, when you're talking about build and fun, it's kind of winning, you know, because winning's fun.
You can
Winning's
have
pretty
fun on your own time. I like
I
that.
was gonna say, private, have fun on your own time.
Private tinkering.
Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of people that do that. I remember towards the tail end of 5, I'd be getting on like
tinkering.
trying to be privately tinkering. Like I'd be trying to get a free battle together. People were like, "No, man, I'm just in the garage tinkering." Like fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, there's just loads of ways to take. Like I say, there's loads of ways to take the word fun, but I think I don't know. For me, fun is like it's always been what happens when I press the button. Like this is why I got bored of machine guns, because when I press the button, it's just brrrr, that's all it is. Like, and that's not fun to me. It's why I found 4th gen really fun, because when I hit the button, it was 2 massive rail cannons just went, you know. And even when I'm playing seriously, if when I press the button, something cool happens, that's where it's fun. And yeah, that comes down to the build and stuff. But it's kind of like if I hit the button, if I hit high boost, and it's a good high boost, it's fun, which is why I don't really like high power boosters, because of the amount of control that's needed. That's, to me, it's not fun because it's hard to control, but I can appreciate it because I've used high power on a few builds. But for me, it's just kind of like, how is my build going to produce good button presses in a way? You know, like fast SES lock and stuff like that, that's all fun, you know?
I always found it fun to just like essentially pre-5th gen is like trying to break the game, trying to see what kind of weird and odd combinations work the best. Because there's a certain point when you've used the 1,000 shot machine gun and you know, op intensify too many times, and you kind of just want to fool around. But you know, post 5th gen, it's kind of the stuff that's harder to use, but I can still win with. So you know, I'm kind of in that group, that weird group.
Yeah, your autocannon tank was just genius.
Daka.
I just remember watching a video of you going up against 2 random guys that you found in free battle
Yep.
on a 5th gen, and all you could hear was them going, "Motherfucker's bought a tank. What the fuck's this? Motherfucker! Fuck! Oh shit!" And then the other one just logs out because he's had enough.
Just nopes out.
It was one of the best videos because you just stay silent through the whole thing, and it's just like Jaws as you see your tank like glide boosting across the arena, just shooting them down. And it's like beforehand they're sort of stalking you out, and it's just kind of like, "Motherfucker's got a tank. I'm gonna take him down." It's these 2 really like gangster guys that obviously hadn't played very much, and you just destroyed them. And I always loved watching those builds because they were really fun to watch. Your tank builds were always really fun.
The good old days.
Strako's a tank. Strako's a tank.
But cannons though.
But
Anyhow, I guess I'll just chime in and say that I like whatever challenges me, and that's either playing a rarely skilled opponent at like the highest level play, or like playing just to have fun by like okay, fun challenge.
But what is fun, Sash? What is fun?
Yeah, I'm saying just challenging, like just sort of like trying to use something that's like it. I don't like Moonlight's on a quad. That's something I really enjoy, just because stabbing people with a big blue laser sword is cool. And it's also hard to do. So it's like I have to play well to make that happen. And like that's what's enjoyable for me. It's I guess the satisfaction of having played well, whatever. Or just stupid shit that goes on. Like that's also entertaining. Does this mean we're about finished? I wonder.
I think so. I mean, I think universal silence is usually the thing that tells us we're done.
Do we need to do an outro?
I guess this is the outro. It's happening right now.
Yeah,
it's time to outro,
guys.
This
is the outro. We're doing it, man.
I can feel myself fading into obscurity.
No. All right. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Happy to have you. Happy for the views, the listens, the whatevers. Leave some comments. Let us know what you'd like to see for next time. We always appreciate community input. Man, I don't know what else. Fucking plug shit. Y'all got plugs?
They'll be down in the description, so just look at that. You've got my channel, obviously, ZeFromCheng, and then you've got Sash Perennial and Otstardva. I'll link those below if you're interested in following them. They have occasionally content when they can be bothered.
Come on!
I tend to be more on Twitch these days, but still, yeah.
I'll link that shit too.
I think that's still a joke somewhere, is that I'm never on the fucking weekly content spot thing that Cheng puts up.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I see how it is. We better end the video there before we get to fighting words.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.